Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Jeff Piercy, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully in this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today, and all your heart longs to sit down. We welcome all of you. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. Guests are warmly invited to attend the Inquirer's session today, immediately after the service in the parlor, to learn more about Unitarian Universalism in our church in a smaller, more casual setting. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you, and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices, braille hymnals, and a fragrance-free area is located on the right side in the first few pews. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages noted in the order of service, please join the children's recitational and head across the hall to the common room there. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. Again, my name is Jeff, and you can come and talk to me there at the guest table. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements. The insert has numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to the following. Our forum speaker this morning is Wisconsin State Senator Chris Larson. He will be speaking on a glimpse of current Wisconsin state politics. Today is the last day to sign up for the Giving Tree. Visit the religious education table to sign up for the Giving Tree gift for a person involved with the food pantry. You sign up, purchase a gift, and return it to church by December 15th. We have 30 tags left. That's plenty, which all need to be claimed today, so thanks for helping. Faith in the Streets kickoff event. Join us today from 1 to 3 p.m. for our first gathering of Faith in the Streets, a new group of members of First Church and Zao Milwaukee Church to bring our faith into the streets in protest, art, and song. If you would like to travel with us up to Zao Church for the event, meet carpoolers in the common room at 12:45. Oh, that's right, you have. She has something to show during this one. On Friday, this is personally sad. We shared the news that our beloved associate musician, Jack Forbes Wilson, has moved to Lincoln, Nebraska to be closer with family. Jack will return to provide music at services on December 22nd, 24th, and 29th, but will no longer be on staff as of January 1st. Jack has requested that we refrain from any official farewell ceremony or event. However, if you'd like to share a written message, memory, or perhaps draw a picture for Jack, please stop by the membership table where we will have a special book that you can sign beginning this Sunday through any Sunday in December. Finally, please silence all electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Now I'd like to call up our chalice lighters, John and Jack Etter, to help us light the chalice.
Our opening words this morning are Waiting for Now by Mandy McGlynn. Everything is about to change, and it already has. It will be, it was, and it is. The dawn you eagerly await to end the long, cold darkness is already full sun far off in the east. Yet even after light's return, spring is still months away. Stones of justice have been tossed in the lake, but their ripples have not yet arrived, have not resolved yet into the kingdom already present among us. While we wait, let us seek in the darkness of the now and the darkness of the not yet for the treasures that love has hidden there, the riches of secrets only found by night. This is what is promised us. The wheel of life turns ever on, and darkness too is a path to joy. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn? To be getting their photos taken this morning during coffee hour, and then those photos will be in the online photo directory. So I invite you all to look them up and welcome them to First Church. And in fact, you too can get your photo taken today during coffee hour. And then it can be put in the directory so folks can recognize you and look you up. Ricky Thompson will be at coffee hour after both services today, taking pictures of members. Just so you know, when you have your picture in the online directory, somebody who saw you once and remembers your first name, but not your last, can look up your first name and see your smiling face and say, aha, that was them. And if you have your picture taken today, we'll even post it for you. Ooh. So although we won't be having our new member ceremony at 9 a.m. this morning, we are going to have our children's recessional after this announcement. So children and teachers, we invite you to sing verse 1 of our children's recessional hymn and then proceed to your classes as the congregation continues to sing you on your way. So congregation, will you please rise in body or spirit and join in our children's recessional hymn number 21. I'd like to invite you all to join now in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So I invite you to do whatever you need to get comfortable in your body. Maybe you feel your sit bones and your feet grounding you. And the top of your head connecting you to all that is. Maybe you can feel your breath moving in and out of your lungs. And use that breath as a hook to bring you into here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Connect us to one another. Human heart to human heart. We know we humans are creatures with powers of beauty and awe, destruction and creation. May we find our breath in all that is awful, and also be inspired to connect with what is awesome. May our lives be part of transforming cruelty to kindness. May we together be part of healing, hope, and a new story for the shared future we'll live together. May it be so.
I was awestruck. I was in the dirt on my knees. My head was on the ground and I was sobbing. The ground I was on was sacred. It was the grave of a family of 6. They had all died on the same day, November 7th, 2013. My cameras were in the dirt of the grave next to this one. And that grave was next to over 100 others, some marked, and a mass grave of unidentified people. They had all died on the same day, November 7th, 2013. I had been sent to the Philippines on assignment by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee to document the continued devastation 1 year after Typhoon Haiyan, or as it is known in the Philippines, Yolanda, devastated 13 islands. I'd spent 2 weeks hopping from island to island showing how contributions had been spent to meet the needs of people. Our last stop was Leyte. The island took the brunt of the landfall. I was in the city of Tacloban for 3 days. Over 8,000 people had been killed in less than 12 hours. 8,000 people in less than 12 hours. In the previous 3 weeks, I had photographed and written about dozens of people who had suffered devastating losses. For example, I spent the previous afternoon with an organization called the Widows of Tacloban. Hundreds of women of all ages whose husbands had died on November 7th, 2013. The women had gotten to higher ground while the men stayed back to protect their homes. Many had never been found. And then I asked to see the mass graves. We came to the church of Santo Nino. An odd thing happens to a working photojournalist. We are only as good as we're able to have our heart open to people we photograph. And at the same time, the camera provides us the illusion of protection and allows us to work in difficult circumstances. But pain and sorrow leak in through the lens of my camera and saturate my soul. I always know that I will need to process these feelings at some point, but the camera allows me to keep working. People had stacked corpses like cordwood along the streets and began to bury them in any open area available. The large front yard of the Church of Santo Nino was turned into a mass grave in a large cemetery. Families were identified with photos on crude headstones. My handlers backed away to allow me to wander through the cemetery. I was suddenly overwhelmed by all I had seen and everyone I had engaged with and the cumulative grief of the people. I was in awe. I was awestruck and simply fell where I was to allow the sadness to pour out of me. But the awe I felt was not limited to the devastation I had observed. The other thing that had overwhelmed me was the incredible resiliency of people. I knew that from the moment of awe, I would never again be able to be just a passive observer of natural and man-made devastation. The courage, perseverance, and kindness of the survivors changed me. We are connected to people who are marginalized through no fault of their own. The vast migrations of people fleeing their homes, the survivors of natural disaster. In Tacloban, with nowhere to turn, survivors found and buried their dead. They discovered internal resources human beings have, but only a few need to access. Families simply redefined themselves by who was left to love. People who had been through devastation I had only observed treated me with kindness. They gave me shelter, they gave me food, they gave me their stories. All I can say is thank you. Salamat. Metakie oyasin.
Merriam-Webster defines awe as an emotion variously combining dread, veneration, and wonder that is inspired by authority or by the sacred or the sublime. The word awe comes from root words meaning fear as well as reverence, and aw's etymological children include both the words awful and awesome. In the word awful, being full of awe has taken on the fear and the dread portions of awe, whereas in the word awesome, being full of awe has taken on the reverence and the wonder portions of the word. But awful and awesome come from the same root. Human beings similarly encompass both aspects of awe. We are awesome and awful in equal measure. In an essay on human resilience and imagination's transformative power, the author Susan Griffin tells a story about the French surrealist poet Robert Desnos, a story which was told to her by her friend Odette, a writer and also a Holocaust survivor. Desnos was part of the French resistance to the Nazi occupation, and in his resistance, he was captured, and he was sent to a concentration camp. While he was there, along with many others, he was put into the back of a truck and taken away from the barracks of the camp. Griffin writes, "Leaving the barracks, the mood is somber. Everyone knows that the truck is headed for the gas chambers. And when the truck arrives, no one can speak at all. Even the guards fall silent. But this silence is soon interrupted by an energetic man who jumps into the line and grabs one of the people who's in it. That energetic man, Robert Desnos, starts to read the other man's palm. 'Oh,' he says, 'I see you have a very long lifeline, and you are going to have 3 children.' Desnos is exuberant, and in his excitement, it's contagious. First, one man and then another man offers Desnos his palm, and again, Robert predicts longevity, many children, abundant joy. Human beings are capable of extreme beauty and extreme awfulness. The word awe encompasses both. We have had an awful series of incidents in our Wisconsin schools this week. In just this last week, there have been 8 threats of school shootings across Wisconsin, including one incident in Waukesha and one in Oshkosh, where students who brought weapons to school were shot by police officers. Both of those students survived, and they did not shoot any other students, but it was terrifying for the students in school and their parents, teachers, and administrators. Waukesha is pretty close to here. We have members who live in Waukesha, members who have family in Waukesha schools, members who have family who are teachers and students and administrators. We have members with family on the responding police force. The Waukesha incident wasn't just news for many people in this room. It was family. When you're talking about family, when you're telling a story about your neighbors or your cousin or your wife or your childhood friend, the story shifts a little bit, it tilts. It can be easy to assume heroes and villains among people we don't know follow a script that we've all read before, but when we're talking about people we do know, a kid who was bullied, for instance, or a teacher who would have given his life to protect his students, or an officer who joined the force because he wanted to help people, when we're talking about students we know, young people who have now lived through a school lockdown and heard the words, "This is not a drill," the feelings are more raw. They're more real, and maybe they're a little more complicated. Telling the story itself becomes complicated as every word carries the weight of someone we love, someone to whom we are obligated in our lives. Does it matter if we tell the story that we say the student who brought the guns to school was bullied? What if we say that he was black? Does it matter if we say that the guns were pellet guns? And what if we then say that there's not a way to tell the difference between a pellet gun and a real gun? Does it matter if we say that the shooting officer was white? What if we then say that the student pointed the pellet gun at the officer before the officer shot? Does it matter if we say members of our congregation knew students at that school? What if we say the shooting officer was a friend of one of our members? Should we focus on telling the story of people who responded in the moment to help others? Should we put a priority on telling what happened to lead up to this moment? Does it matter if we say what was happening at school or at home before the incident? Should we talk about where the guns came from? Do we need to tell the stories that are the histories of everyone who was involved that day? Do we need to tell the stories of the systems and the policies and the training that framed the framework of those histories? There is awful and awesome and the whole range of human beings and human actions in between those, and all the tributaries of all the stories that led in to this one moment. Since Monday, I've been contacted by members of our community who are connected to teachers and students and police officers, all approaching this story with their heads and their hearts, trying to wade through both fear and interconnection. In the Robert Desnos story, when he's standing in line to the gas chamber, the surrealist poet kept reading more and more palms, predicting long and joyful lives for every prisoner in line to the gas chamber. Griffin writes, as Desnos reads more palms, not only does the mood of the prisoners change, but that of the guards too. They are somehow connected to this story that's unfolding, and they are disoriented by this sudden change of mood. They are so disoriented that they are unable to go through with the executions. So all of the men, including Desnos, are put back onto the truck and taken back to the barracks. No one went to the gas chamber that day, and Robert Desnos was never executed. Human beings are both awful and awesome in equal parts. Robert Desnos showed resilience and creativity in the face of seemingly insurmountable horror. And he started to tell a story that was in wild opposition to reality. But in sharing that alternative vision, it took hold. And enthusiasm, connection, and love became powerful enough to transform the horror story that was unfolding. How can we transform awfulness in our own community? How can we be part of telling an alternative story and bring it into being? Sometimes we tell stories in ways that dehumanize people. Sometimes we tell stories in ways that take complicated and multifaceted human beings and collapse them into flat character cutouts. This week, I hope we're learning that that's a bit harder to do when a story's close to home and you know the people. Universalism's theology holds that all people are sacred and inherently worthy, even in the midst of suffering and harm. But just as we cannot collapse complex people into flat heroes or villains, nor can we collapse complex stories into a flat everyone matters and so it's all the same. Everyone does matter, but not everyone has had the same experience. Differences in our lives, including differences of power, affect how much we have been harmed, how we process harm, and the choices that we make surrounding harm. The practice of restorative justice seeks to deal with harm in ways that are consistent with our universalist theology and recognize the unique specifics of real life people. Restorative justice respects the full humanity of everyone involved in an awful incident, but it doesn't flatten that humanity into simple archetypes. Restorative justice processes allow people to tell their full stories, their full histories, and feel their full range of feelings. It brings people who have been involved in harm into deep encounter with one another inside a framework of acknowledging and attempting to repair that harm. Restorative justice also recognizes that relationships go beyond offender-victim and involve the larger community. It recognizes that everyone is connected and that the harm both came out of and goes back into the entire community. It says that none of us, none of the actors in an awful incident are isolated individuals, but rather that we're all connected to one another and to larger systems. and longer histories. Restorative justice has been used in criminal justice systems and in schools. It's even been used in international relations following conflict and mass violence. It's understood as an alternative to punitive or retribution frameworks because its focus is on repairing harm as an outcome, which is different focus than on punishing offenders. Repairing harm as the focus puts the victims of harm at the center of the story and asks them what their needs are. At the same time, it doesn't exclude the humanity or the story of the person who committed the harm. Instead, it asks that person to be in relationship with and accountable to the people and community that they have harmed, so that they can understand the impact of their actions. Restorative justice asks fundamentally different questions than retributive justice. Instead of asking what laws have been broken and by who and what punishment do they deserve for breaking those laws, it asks the questions: who has been hurt? What are their needs? Whose obligation is it to respond to those needs? It also asks, why did this happen? What are the root causes? How did this harm come to be? Who has a stake in this situation, and how should they be involved? In asking those questions, we're looking at a more complex and interdependent web of relationship. We're thinking about what are the community's basis that was involved in the situation, and how can the community be involved in repairing harm? Sadly, we're in the middle of an epidemic of harm when it comes to gun violence. In 2018, more school-aged children were killed by gun homicide than members of the military and police officers combined. That's part of the context of our story, part of what we're experiencing, part of where the shuddering fear and dread comes from. Another piece of the context is that race makes a difference in children's experience with gun violence. Black children and youth in the United States are 14 times more likely to be the victims of gun homicide than white children and youth. This terrifying story of gun violence in a Waukesha school and in 7 other Wisconsin schools this week is a story that's unfolded in our Black neighborhoods over and over. And that is also part of the larger context of our story. Restorative justice asks these kinds of larger context questions, as well as questions about the harm that was experienced in the specific incident. And we know that deep harm was done this week by the student who brought those 2 pellet guns to school in Waukesha and pointed them both at a fellow student and at police officers. We also know that deep harm was done to that student who was shot. And even more deep harm has been done by the gun companies who make guns so widely available that the specter of school shootings is the known story in our schools. The kids who ran screaming from the school and heard gunshots knew what was going on. They understood what they were experiencing in the larger context of school shootings in America. That's where part of the deep terror and fear of both the students and their parents and the teachers came from. There are many students around the country in the United States who are just waiting for something like this to happen at their school. It's both surreal and so real. These are many of the different pieces of harm that have to be addressed in a restorative way that repairs human connection in order for people to heal. Thinking about restoration and repair is complicated because the roots of why go deep. It's a lot easier to just think about punishment. But that's not part of our Unitarian Universalist theology. Our theology links the inherent worth of every single human being into an interdependent web of all existence. It's a complex version of universalism that both respects all people and also recognizes the way that harm is distributed among them in different ways. It understands complexity in individual lives and in their relationships among people. Our universalism does not condemn people who have caused harm in this world, but it simultaneously empowers victims to identify their own needs and then ask those needs to be met. It puts them at the center of the repair work. The stories that we tell matter. Robert Desnos started telling a story of hope that was so compelling and so wildly different from reality that it disoriented Nazi guards who were in the middle of a death mission. Right now, we could pretty easily tell a story of retribution and punishment, of simple, flat heroes and villains. Or we could imagine something wildly different, something more complicated, something perhaps more inclusive, something that goes deeper and wider and recognizes the humanity of everyone involved, their long and complex histories, and the bigger picture that led to this particular moment of awfulness. My hope is that we invoke the power of human connection to repair and transform that awfulness. Restorative justice is one tool that might help facilitate the kind of transformation that our community needs. It can help us encounter one another and our long and complicated stories, our deep histories, and the complicated truths that we live. I hope we take this opportunity to examine the root causes of harm and begin to employ a preventative medicine, as well as repairing the harm that's been done in this incident. The ending of our story is not written yet. We can be part of choosing to dream some impossible dream that is wildly different than the reality that we're living in. We can share that share that vision with one another and with people in our city, it will connect us like little strings of lights in this holiday season, spreading and becoming more powerful every time it's shared. As dreams of hope and connection in the face of awfulness, repair and communal transformation in the darkness light up more and more people in this room and out in the world, those visions are going to start taking shape. Will you hold your palms up for me, dear ones? I'd like to read your future. All right, what do we got here? Oh, I see visions of repair and healing, preventing future gun violence. I see visions of racial reconciliation and justice in our city. I see clean water and air. Oh, and I see long and healthy, joyful lives in each and every one of you. May it be so.
Every week we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all non-pledged cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with We Got This, Milwaukee. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us for the responsive reading printed in your orders of service. This is adapted from Jan Richardson's Advent Blessing. I'll begin. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times. Who bear witness to its persistence. Blessed are you in whom the light lives.
In whom the brightness blazes.
Your heart a chapel, an altar, where in the deepest night
Can be seen the fire that shines forth in you.
in unaccountable faith,
In suffering hope.
in love that illumines. Will you join us in singing our closing hymn, number 118, This Little Light of Mine?